The woods were my sanctuary. Every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I'd escape into their familiar embrace. The air, usually alive with birdsong, was strangely still. The golden light, typically dappling the forest floor, felt heavy and ominous. An unsettling quiet had settled over the woods, amplifying every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs beneath my feet. It was the golden hour, but fear painted the sky a sickly yellow. My sanctuary was holding its breath, and I was starting to feel like the intruder. I pressed on, my pace quickening. The forest, usually a place of solace and peace, felt different today. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and the usual chirping of birds and rustling of leaves seemed to have vanished, replaced by an eerie silence that weighed heavily on my senses. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, prickling with an unnerving awareness. Every step I took seemed to echo louder than it should, as if the forest itself was amplifying my presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. It felt like eyes were on me, watching, following. Shadows seemed to move just out of my line of sight, and the trees, once familiar and friendly, now loomed ominously, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare me. I told myself it was just nerves, the silence playing tricks on my mind. But the deeper I ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The forest, my sanctuary, was now a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. But deep down, a primal fear began to stir. Something was wrong. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to flee from whatever unseen danger lurked in the shadows. My breaths came quicker, each one a struggle against the rising tide of panic. This wasn't my sanctuary anymore. The forest had transformed into a place of dread, each step forward feeling like a step deeper into a trap. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness, offering no promise of safety or escape. This was a hunting ground. I was no longer a visitor but prey, and the forest was the predator's domain. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent jolts of fear through my body, urging me to run. I turned to leave, my heart pounding against my ribs. The urgency to escape overpowered any rational thought. My mind raced with images of unseen pursuers, and the need to reach safety became all-consuming. My usual leisurely stroll became an urgent march, each step heavier than the last. The forest floor, once soft and welcoming, now felt like a treacherous terrain, each root and rock a potential hazard in my desperate flight. I just needed to get out of the woods. The shadows seemed to close in around me, and the path ahead was a blur of dark shapes and looming trees. My legs burned with the effort, but I couldn't afford to slow down. Get back to the familiar, the safe. The edge of the forest where light and safety awaited became my sole focus. With every ounce of strength, I pushed forward, driven by the primal need to survive. Finally, the trees began to thin, and the oppressive darkness gave way to the welcoming light of the open field. I had made it out, but the memory of that walk would haunt me forever. Then I heard it, my name carried on the wind. A whisper, barely audible, yet it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. I strained to hear over the frantic thumping of my heart, but the sound was gone. Just the eerie stillness remained. Had I imagined it? No. There it was again. My name, a little louder this time, laced with a playful malice. It was close, too close. Panic seized me. My feet, finally heeding the warnings of my mind, sprang into action. I ran. I didn't look back. The forest floor became a blur of brown and green as I pushed myself harder, faster. Branches whipped at my face, tearing at my clothes, but I didn't dare slow down. The whisper followed me, growing closer, clearer. It no longer sounded human. It was something else, something ancient and hungry. My lungs burned, my legs screamed for respite, but the chilling sound of my name, twisted and contorted, spurred me on. It was toying with me, herding me deeper into the heart of the whispering woods. Section 5. Twisted trees, tangled paths. The once familiar paths became a labyrinth of twisted trees and thorny vines. The trees, once strong and reassuring, now loomed over me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to grasp me. Panic choked my thoughts, making it impossible to remember which way led back to safety. The voice was right behind me now, laughing cruelly. It spoke of secrets, of things hidden deep within the woods, of a darkness that would swallow me whole. It promised me oblivion, and I desperately wanted to believe it. Section 6. No escape. I tripped, falling hard on the unforgiving ground. Pain shot through my ankle, but I couldn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the throbbing in my ankle. The whisper was almost on top of me now, the air thick with its fetid breath. I could smell the decay, feel the cold touch of something unnatural on my skin. There was nowhere left to run, no sanctuary remained. I was trapped in a nightmare, the whispering woods my prison. Section 7. Home, but not safe. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart race. The dark woods seemed to close in around me, every shadow a potential threat. With a last burst of adrenaline, I broke free of the trees, my breath ragged and my legs burning from the effort. The forest had been a maze of terror, each step a desperate attempt to escape the unseen horrors lurking within. Stumbling onto the familiar cobblestone street of my neighborhood, I felt a momentary sense of disorientation. The dim light of the street lamps cast long, eerie shadows, making the once familiar surroundings seem alien and foreboding. Relief washed over me, brief and fleeting. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless reminder that I was not yet safe. The quiet street offered no comfort, only a temporary respite from the terror that had pursued me. My house stood at the end of the street, a beacon of warmth and light in the oppressive darkness. It seemed almost too good to be true, a sanctuary amidst the chaos. I didn't waste a moment, sprinting towards it with every ounce of strength I had left. The distance seemed to stretch endlessly, each step a battle against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. My keys clutched tightly in my hand, I could feel the cold metal biting into my palm. The familiar weight was a small comfort, a reminder that safety was within reach. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Each second felt like an eternity, the fear of being caught gnawing at my resolve. Finally managing to get the door open, I felt a surge of relief. The creak of the hinges was a welcome sound, a barrier between me and the darkness outside. I slammed it shut behind me, the sound echoing through the empty house. It was a final act of defiance against the terror that had chased me. The deadbolt sliding into place with a satisfying thunk, I felt a momentary sense of security. The solid barrier between me and the outside world was a small comfort. I was safe. I was home. Or so I thought. The silence inside was almost as oppressive as the darkness outside. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind, seemed to carry a hidden threat. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the safety of my home was an illusion. The night was far from over, and the true terror was just beginning. Section 8. The voice inside, the whisper. It was inside the house. My blood ran cold. It slithered through the air vents, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in my bones. It was no longer mocking, no longer playful. The voice was filled with a cold, calculating rage. It knew I was here. It knew I was trapped. My sanctuary, my safe haven had been violated. The whispering woods had followed me home. It was no longer content to torment me within its own domain. It had come for me. Section 9. Shadows and Doubts. I backed away from the vent, my heart hammering against my ribs. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of the intruder. But there was nothing. Just the familiar furniture, the soft glow of the lamplight, the comforting silence that now felt heavy with unspoken threats. Or was it silent? Had the whisper always been there, lurking beneath the surface of my reality, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? Had I been living a lie, my sense of security nothing more than a cruel illusion? Section 10. Trapped. I was trapped in a nightmare, but the line between dream and reality had blurred. Was I losing my mind? Or was something truly evil stalking me, its whispers weaving their way into my sanity, unraveling me from the inside out? I had no answers, only questions that echoed in the silence of my once peaceful home. Fear, cold and paralyzing, held me captive. I was a prisoner in my own home, the whispering woods closing in, suffocating me with its unseen presence. Section 11. A glimmer of hope? The night was thick with an unsettling silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart race. The woods around my house seemed to close in, the trees whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. Then, a sound cut through the oppressive silence. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more insistent. It was a gentle tapping, rhythmic and persistent, like a heartbeat in the stillness of the night, a gentle tapping at my window. My heart leaped into my throat as I turned towards the sound. The tapping continued, each tap echoing in the quiet room, filling it with a strange sense of urgency. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. The room seemed to shrink around me, the shadows growing longer and darker. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the window, my steps hesitant and slow. A pair of familiar eyes met mine, filled with concern. They were eyes I knew well, eyes that had seen me through countless trials and tribulations. But tonight, they were different. They were filled with a worry that mirrored my own. My best friend, bathed in the pale moonlight, stood on my porch. Her presence was both a comfort and a mystery. What was she doing here in the dead of night in this place of shadows and whispers? Had she heard the whispers too? The same whispers that had been haunting me, filling my nights with dread and my days with unease? Or was she here for another reason, one that I couldn't yet fathom? Or was she a figment of my unraveling mind, a cruel trick of the darkness closing in? The line between reality and illusion had become so blurred I could no longer trust my own senses. Was she real, or just another phantom of my troubled mind? Hope, fragile and uncertain, flickered within me. Could she help? Could her presence be the beacon of light I so desperately needed in this sea of darkness? The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Could she save me from this madness? The madness that had been creeping in, slowly but surely, threatening to consume me whole? I reached out, my hand trembling, hoping that she was real, that she could pull me back from the brink. Or would she too be consumed by the whispers of the woods? The same whispers that had taken hold of me, that had turned my world into a nightmare? Only time would tell, but for now, her presence was a glimmer of hope in the darkness.